This is going on YouTube. No more high school stories.
I got a little message, Nicole, that says it's now streaming live on YouTube.
That's correct. You can actually see it on your upper left corner. Everyone should have a little live on YouTube message there.
Gotcha.
So we are now live. Mr. Chair, I believe we have a quorum.
Well, I can now say officially good afternoon to everyone on the community CTAC here today. Sorry that we have to start off the meeting with some sad news. I'm sure most of you have heard, but we lost Bud Vi about a week ago. Bud joined our CTAC back in, and bear with me, it was February of 1999 when he joined CTAC, so he'd been around for a long time. And if I may, I reached out to Champ Burnley and I asked Champ if he might take just a minute or so and speak about Bud. So Champ, if you would.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. And again, I'm sorry if you hadn't heard about that. Bud had been sick for a little over a year and he passed away Friday night in his apartment with his family. And we're really sorry to lose him. You know, Bud was 87 years old. And I tell you, up until the last year or so, he was just an Energizer bunny. I think Bud was riding his bike actually up until about 18 months ago. And Bud was an institution. You'd always see him down at the Virginia Museum for jazz on Thursday night. You'd see him out at Innsbruck. And I tell you, he would run circles around most anyone half his age. And I have to commend him for that. One thing, I mean this most sincerely, I tell you, Bud and I had quite a lot of time together as colleagues and friends over the past 20, 25 years. And he really thought a lot of CTAC. He enjoyed your friendship, your insights, and your collegialism. And it meant a lot. You know, Bud was a guy who didn't sit around. He was involved with the community. He was involved with his church, with Caritas, certainly on a number of boards, including, you know, my board with the Virginia Bicycling Federation. And he really set an example, I think, for everybody. The other thing, too, is Bud was just an institution down at the General Assembly. And he had a certain respect and I think people down there were just amazed to see this 85-year-old guy lobbying for bike and pedestrian issues. And there was a certain deference and respect that we saw on both sides of the aisle. And it meant a lot to him, but it certainly meant a lot to me to see that people would tone things down and treat him with a certain deference, which was very inspiring. You know, one thing, and I'll mention this, Patty Kraszewski did a little article on him about a month ago in the Henrico Citizen. I'll put a link in the chat bar in a minute. Take a minute to look at it. Bud was just awarded a Valentine History Maker Award, which meant a lot to him. He was also the Advocate of the Year in 2009 for the Alliance for Bicycling and Walking. And there were 2 resolutions that just came out in the 2020 session commending him, and it really meant a lot to him. But anyway, for those of you that are interested, Bud's birthday was July 25th. He would have been 88. And last year, in his honor, Rrtpo put together a COVID ride. They're going to do that again this year on July 24th, which is a Saturday. And the family has a memorial service planned for him tentatively on Sunday, the 25th. I know he would be honored for any of you all that could attend that. And as soon as I have further details, I will forward that to you, Mr. Chairman, for distribution. But again, Bud leaves some big shoes to fill for all of us and set a fine example. And I hope we can live up to that. So again, I will miss him, and I'm sure you will too. Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much, Champ. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Yeah, Bud always sat beside me at CTAC. You know what, guys, you know what I'm saying is that we all seem to gravitate to one side or the other, one end, but Bud always came in and sat beside me, and he was always fun to talk to. He really was. So, well, if I may, Nicole, we need to move ahead. I think we need to do a roll call. When you hear your name, please respond with here or present so that she can get a good head count, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll start with Town of Ashland, Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Beals.
Here.
Mr. Richwine. And I see Mr. Richwine has called in this afternoon. I'm going to see if I can unmute him so he can respond. Mr. Richwine. He may not be able to, but I see that he's with us this afternoon. Moving on, Goochland County, Chair Basham.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Here.
Henrico County, Ms. Lancaster.
Here.
New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie.
Here, and Nicole, if I may, I had my hand raised. I don't guess the chairman saw it, but I would like to ask Champ if he could also share the link to the Valentine Award for Bud. I never actually got to see that, and I think they have it recorded.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I just put the Henrico Citizen link in, but give me about 5 minutes and I'll have that to you, Lisa.
And Champ, if you decide that you want to proceed with seeking a resolution at the General Assembly to honor Bud, I'd be happy to help you with that.
I appreciate that. Again, we, Servell and Dolores McQuinn both introduced resolutions that passed commending him while he was alive. And Dolores has already asked about a memorial resolution. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Guthrie. Moving on, New Kent County, Mr. Moyer. Powhatan County, Mr. Powers. I think Mr. Powers is here with us. I see you're trying to unmute, Mr. Powers. I see you. City of Richmond, Ms. Erickson. Mr. Barnhart. Mr. Hill. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter. Mr. Mayman. NAACP, Mr. Minor. Mr. Johnson.
We are here.
League of Women Voters, Ms. Coles.
Here.
Ms. Crutchfield. Raba, Mr. Burnley.
I am here. Thank you.
Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, Mr. Testerman.
Present.
Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Fisher. And last but not least, VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And by the way, I did get a message from Mike Testerman that said that Herb Richwine talked to him and said, please make sure he's counted as present. So I didn't know if he saw that. First thing that we need to go over is, are there any considerations or amendments to the meeting agenda?
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the body to consider amending the agenda to remove item B3. That's a presentation on disability inclusive transportation assessment by Rebecca Cesares. Rebecca could not be with us today, and we're going to reschedule that presentation. So I would ask that we approve amending the agenda to remove item B3.
Okay, do we need to do a full roll call on that, or can we just say unless somebody's opposed?
And Mr. Chair, if we could get a motion, but you can ask for a voice vote. We don't need to do a roll call.
Okay, may I please have a motion about removing Rebecca's presentation from today's agenda?
So move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I think I caught Ms. Coles make the motion. Who made the second, please?
I heard Virginia. Who did the second? There was a gentleman.
Resnick.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on. I need, unless someone sees something about being adjusted from the minutes from our last meeting on March the 18th. First off, does anybody see anything that needs to be changed or amended? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the March 18th, 2021 CTAC meeting minutes.
Move that we approve the March 18th, 2021 CTAC meeting minutes.
That's Mr. Martin. And do I have a second?
Second.
That's John Leonard of BCU's the second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, we're moving on. We have open public comment here. And Nicole, I don't know if you see anybody. Do you see anything that says that there's someone that wants to speak to us?
No, sir, and no one's joined us this afternoon, and I have not received anything by email.
Okay. That being then, it's back to my report, which I don't have. We've covered everything that I was going to. And now we're on to the Rrtpo updates. Mr. Chet Parsons, I'm sure he's there. If you might go ahead and take over, Chet.
Mr. Chair, I don't see that he has joined us this afternoon.
Uh-oh. Well, do we want to go ahead with Chris Arabia, however that's in, and wait for him to come back? Or how would you like to handle that, Ken?
Mr. Chair, there should be a report included in your agenda packet.
Right.
Am I correct on that, Nicole?
You are. The policy board and TAC meetings report is in your meeting packet, as well as the current work efforts.
Yep.
I think that information is self-explanatory.
Absolutely. Like I said, I just didn't know if we needed to come back to him, that you were expecting him anytime or whatever. Folks, like I said, you were sent in that part of your agenda. It was an extra little click to get the full information. I suggest that you look to read through. If you've got some questions, please reach out to Chet and direct your questions to him. Would that be correct, Ken?
That is correct.
Okie doke. Well, that being going through, we're on to new business. COVID-19 and its implications on commuting and telework by Chris, am I saying Arabia?
Either one works, actually, but Arabia is probably the more common.
Oh, okay, no problem. Welcome, Chris. You've got control.
All right, thank you. So thank you. Yes, I'm Chris Arabia. I'm the manager of statewide commuter programs for the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. And we've all been through a lot on the transportation side, in particular with COVID. So I'm just going to kind of give you some insights and take some questions if you've got them. Next slide, Nicole. So just to recap, I think we all know what happened, but just put this up to recap. COVID hit. March 2020 was the state of emergency, the stay-at-home order from the governor. Businesses closed. Businesses that had office workers that could do their work remotely, everyone was sent home to work from home full time. And one of the things that my agency works on is trying to mitigate traffic congestion, and particularly the program that I work on. And COVID, unfortunately took a pandemic, but COVID did that for us. Traffic counts in March and in early April just dropped to about 60 to 65% of the normal levels. So we no longer had a traffic congestion problem. Essential workers were still coming, needing to come to work. Transit ridership dropped off in a huge way. Some routes, though, were doing okay because of those essential workers and people needing to go, relying on transit to go shopping for groceries and what have you. So some routes were okay, but overall the ridership dropped a lot. And van pools, those were parked. So a lot of van pools just, commuters weren't going to work. So the van pools were just parked in someone's driveway or getting back to the van pool company. And, that's where they stayed for a long time. And then, of course, we all learned to Zoom. I didn't know Zoom was a noun. I always thought it was a verb, but we all learned now that how to do a Zoom. Next slide. So just briefly, our response, we created a guide back in August on how how to actually in July, and how to commute safely with your carpooling or van pooling or transit. There was a lot of guidance on riding transit from CDC and the executive and the governor, and then FDA came out with the mask mandate on public transportation. So our job was to disseminate that information not only to the public, but also the transit agencies, commuter assistance programs, so that everyone kind of knew. We didn't want to say don't, take transit, don't carpool, but we obviously knew with the pandemic, people had concerns about the spread of COVID, and so we wanted to highlight things that everyone could do to do it safely. If you have to travel, this is how you can do it safely. All right, next slide. All right, and it caused a lot of changes to our commuter assistance, employer assistance program. So you probably have heard of Ride Finders in the Richmond region. That's kind of the commuter assistance program for the whole region. They're part of GRTC, and so like everyone else in Virginia, things changed. So we didn't need to market carpooling, van pooling, and even transit because most people were working from home. And the people who were traveling were already in their mode. We didn't want to make it feel like if you felt unsafe to carpool with someone and you drove alone, we did not want to make those folks feel bad by saying, get out of your car and carpool. So we just didn't see a need for that marketing. Obviously, in-person events and promotional events and things that we normally do to promote commuting options just didn't happen, right? All the Earth Day and all those things that normally took place didn't happen. At DRPT, like a lot of bike organizations included, we canceled the May 2020 Bike to Work Week promotion. A lot of that entailed, in meeting, cyclists meeting up in certain groups to, get some refreshments and do some things. All of that was canceled, across Virginia. And then annually, we've been holding a Tri-Transit Week and challenge in September, where our contest winner will win free transit for the whole year. Didn't seem like that was really appropriate this past September. So what we did, and partnering with a lot of other agencies, we changed it to a Transit Appreciation Month, which we held in October. And that was really to highlight, first it was to thank the transit employees, the frontline bus operators and vehicle operators that were out there, still getting people, the public, to where they needed to go and still on the job. We really wanted to recognize them for their efforts and for doing that as a vital service that they were providing. But we also wanted to let the public know what these transit agencies were doing as far as cleaning the vehicles and wearing the masks and distancing within, within the seats of the vehicle, so that to it was a public information campaign, but also we wanted to let people know if you have the right transit, if you're going to, we're doing everything that we can do to keep you safe. All right, next slide. And then assistance with employers. So, we have this Telework Virginia program, DRPT operates, and we've had that since 2001. And a lot of what we did with that was promote the benefits of teleworking to businesses. What's good about teleworking, how does it work? And again, we were only looking at teleworking one day a week. We, from a transportation traffic mitigation perspective, we can get employees that can work from home one day a week, not to drive that one day. That would have some impact, positive impact on traffic congestion. We were not ever pushing full-time telework like what happened during the pandemic. But obviously we didn't need to tell people what telework is about because they were experiencing it. Every March, we have a Telework Week promotion where we encourage businesses to at least pilot a telework program for that week, just to test it if they don't have a telework program. And for employees who are able to telework with their employer permission to work from home one day that week. That was all canceled because, quite frankly, everyone was working from home. And we also did not do one this past March either. But our Telework Virginia program is still out there helping businesses. We did get a lot of calls at the onset of the pandemic. Businesses were scrambling to how do I make this work? All my employees are now working from home. What do I do? I think we found that the businesses that had a robust telework program in place were much better capable of handling that than ones that just didn't have a telework program in place. And our program helped out a lot of businesses throughout Virginia kind of cope with that kind of emergency, extreme teleworking that they had to jump into. So we're still there to help businesses as needed with even the transition, and we'll talk about that in a minute, back to the office. But again, no on-site meetings at employer sites. This was a big thing that programs like Ride Finders do. They, getting to the employees at the office has always been a big positive entryway to talking to them about their commute options. And without that opportunity to go there and meet with the employees, it became a bit of a challenge. However, a lot of them weren't really looking for commute options during most of the pandemic. But it was a game changer. As we're having virtual meeting right now. Everything went virtually, but we have done some things with training teleworkers and things like that virtually. So we've had to adapt. All our commuter assistance programs, all of us, we've had to adapt to what's going on. All right, next slide. So now the big question is, where do we go from here? What does all this mean? Looking into the crystal ball. I was just on this morning. I was on on another virtual meeting with the Central Shenandoah PDC, and they had the Virginia Economic Development Partnership talk about. They recently did a survey to find out what employers are doing as far as hiring people, and about if there's opportunities for Virginia to bring people into Virginia to live, even if they work out of state, because they can work remotely from Virginia, but also gauge, are we going to lose potential teleworkers or workers who might leave the state to work, somewhere else. And they were baffled as much as I am about what does the future hold, because it's changing. Now, traffic is already back to 80 to 90% of the pre-COVID levels, and it's still going up. Those are numbers from VDOT. And so that if traffic congestion was a reason for someone not to drive, that reason is coming back. The recent CDC guidance on not having to wear a mask if you're vaccinated, not have to keep distancing, we think could be a big game changer. What we were hearing up until now, that employers, businesses a lot of them were going to take the summer to figure out how to bring employees back. But these new guidance from CDC could accelerate that and bring folks back sooner. The big thing with all of this, I think why you didn't see more people going back to the office sooner, was because schools were still in virtual mode. And as we all know, a lot of parents had to stay home to monitor their young children who are doing their classes virtually. I'm sure you're reading the same thing I am. In the fall, it's looking like a lot of that, if not most of it or all of it's going to be in person. And so businesses who are looking at that for their employees, not forcing them to come back to the office because they knew they had to stay home and help their children with their school, that might not be an issue. So those folks might be coming back sooner. And, so the surveys, we through the state with partner with VDOT, we did a couple of surveys. The Greater Washington Partnership did surveys. There's surveys galore about trying to figure out what the future holds. So what we're seeing from all these surveys, a common theme is that even though a lot of employees didn't like full-time working from home, they want to get back to the office and see their colleagues. Most of them are hey, you know what? I got a taste of telework. I don't want to go to the office every day. So I'd like to work 2 or 3 days a week from home. And businesses are hearing that and responding to that, knowing that they're going to have to keep, as the economy gets better and job market gets better. If you're a top employee, you're going to have some options, and the employer doesn't want to lose those top people. And if allowing them to work from home a couple of days a week is going to help them stay, that's probably something that a business might do. I don't think that there's going to be this full-time telework like we've had, just because I don't think most people like that, unless you're really in that to the technology business where you're just focusing on on your computer and you're not really having to interact socially with folks. But I think, what I'm hearing is a lot of people want to bring back, people in the office to at least, meet and, do that collaboration, and having those discussions, is a little easier in person. So I think you will see folks back. I don't think, our numbers were showing anywhere from 5 to 10% teleworking in Virginia. And then of course it went up to 60% or higher during the height of the pandemic. I don't think it's going to drop all the way back to 5 or 10%. And I don't think it's going to be anywhere near 60 or 50%. I think it's probably going to be in the 15 to 20% range, just because I think, again, we're not going to see everyone doing telework 5 days a week. It'll be, 1 to 3 days max. But that does affect a lot of other things, traffic, but also the other commute modes, and transit is certainly a big concern, right? Will those riders come back? And, I'm never confused with being an optimist, but I tend to be on the more optimistic side about riders coming back. I think that with, even if they're working from home 2 days a week, I think the days that they will go into the office, if they were taking transit before, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't take transit on those days going back to the office. So I do see ridership coming back. We're already seeing that trend already. As workers go back to the office, we're seeing the ridership trends come back up a little bit. Obviously, we're not at the level where we were pre-COVID, and that's where we want to get to. But we're seeing the ridership. And again, those surveys where we ask people, what were you doing before COVID and what do you think you'll do afterwards? It seems like most of them are looking at doing, taking the same commute mode they were before the pandemic. And so I think that bodes well for bringing back a lot of the transit ridership. Another thing that happened, as I mentioned earlier, van pooling was decimated by the pandemic because people were just working from home, and you can't run an empty van pool. And so all those things are parked. We're seeing some of that come back, but I think we're around like an average about half of the levels we were for van pooling. We've had a lot of discussions. What does van pooling look like? Because right now, the ones that have come back are not full vans. Typically, they're like the average van pool was about 6 or 7 people. And we're seeing, 3 to 4 being the size of van pools. That's a concern of ours to see, where that trending is going to go. It means these van pool companies are going to have to adapt to, what the new normal for van pooling looks like. And maybe smaller van pools, but it might be more of them. That's yet to be seen. And then, I can mention how much teleworking where there'll be. I think we're going to have a much higher teleworking where, and again, I'm talking about people who aren't working full-time from home, but working, 2 days a week. I think that's going to be, at least for the short term, for a year. I think that will be the trend, and from the data that these surveys certainly show that. But the fact of the matter is, no one knows for sure, right? What's really going to happen, and we just have to be adaptive to looking at what's going on. But we do see signs that things as far as transit ridership and commuting will be a little bit more normal, particularly in the fall. It's hard to gauge the summer because what we're seeing is people are now finally going on vacations this summer, and summer was always the traffic and commuting was always very different in the summer months. So Labor Day is going to be the big turning point to see after Labor Day what it looks like, and we're looking at signs that says it's going to look a lot more like pre-COVID than during the middle of COVID, as far as traffic back on the roads and transit riderships coming back. But again, telework is the wild card of the what businesses may do with that, and obviously we think there's going to be a higher level of that, and that will impact transportation, but not at the levels that we had during the height of COVID. So that's kind of where I stop, because that's about all we know at this point. I think a lot of people are surveyed out. We're having really hard time getting people and businesses to answer questions about this, but we are constantly trying to gauge what businesses are doing, because I think they're going to be the key to all this, right? Bringing their employees back is going to be a real key. We're seeing, we're seeing the restrictions lifted, so it's I don't think that lingering restrictions are going to be much of a factor going forward. As those go away, it will be what businesses are going to do with their employees. It's going to be the big, that's the wild card. And I wish I knew the answer, but I guess what we can do is just, monitor that and adapt to it.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, comment?
Yes, Champ, go
Yeah,
ahead.
a couple of observations, Chris. Just FYI, last Friday I had to be in Maryland and I drove up there and I literally did not slow down until I was in Maryland. And in 35 years, I can remember one time not slowing down until the 14th Street Bridge. So something's going on up there, which is pretty amazing. But the other thing, and this is an aside, but it's germane to DRPT, and I wanted to make sure everybody knew about this. DRPT made a big change about 2 weeks ago, and they announced the ability to carry bikes on the Amfleet cars. You all probably remember, we've been working on this for about 15 years. And in the past, you could put a bike on a baggage car. And now they retrofitted the standard Amfleet cars with bike racks in the luggage towers, which doesn't sound like a big deal. But what that essentially does, most Amtrak stations in Virginia don't have baggage cars. So now you can essentially take a bike on and off at virtually every station, like Ashland or Ettrick, Staples Mill, downtown. And that's a huge change. And just to give you some perspective, pre-COVID, they announced this about 3 years ago, and Amtrak sold over 50,000 bike tickets each year. So that, 50,000 is not an insignificant number. And anyway, I just wanted to publicly thank DRPT for working with us on that and making those upgrades, because for a lot of people, for example, in Roanoke, did not have the option since they didn't have baggage car service, and a lot of people out in the valley and other places have wanted to do it. So, Chris, I want to, if you'll extend that up to Jennifer and everyone else, thanks very much for working with us on that.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I will definitely extend that thanks on the way up. And you bring up a good point about being multimodal. And that was kind of another indicator that we're seeing in some of these surveys, that people might be more multimodal than they were before, where one day they'll take this, or they'll combine like a bike on Amtrak or a bike on transit type of thing. So we might see more of that kind of mix as far as commuting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, are there other questions for Chris?
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes, Ken.
Picking up on what Champ's remarks, one of the things that I've heard is that there's been an increase in bicycling activity, that individuals have indicated that there's a reluctance to get back on transit because of the, being in close proximity to other people. So people who are interested in commuting by bike, that there's been an increase in biking activity, and that's been reflected, I think, in bicycle sales. So it'll be interesting to see if that is sustained. Secondly, the comment that Chris made about teleworking. Yesterday, I sat in on a Richmond BizSense panel discussion about returning to work, and one of the panelists was an HR representative from Dominion Energy, and she indicated that going forward, that their policy is most likely going to be that they're going to ask employees to telework no more than 2 days per week. So that might be sort of a trend going forward. And thirdly, I think that one of the benefits of all this, if you will, has been an improvement in air quality, and we've seen that that we haven't had any code red or days in a good while. So there have been some side benefits from all of this.
Is there anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Hi, this is Susan Beals from Chesterfield County.
Hi,
I just wanted to ask the speaker, what level of employment are y'all at? Do you have drivers that you had to lay off? What percentage are currently working? Do you have some that are still laid off that you're hoping to bring back?
So what I'm hearing on the transit side is that, and GRTC, I think, is one of them. I think you might see their commercials on TV for hiring drivers. They are not alone in that. So a lot of drivers, either through cuts in service, got laid off, or just because they were really concerned about, I think you've all heard there was a few, at least a couple of deaths from in GRTC for drivers catching COVID. And so there was a lot of concern, and a lot of drivers quit. And now there's a driver shortage. So the idea, we're trying to work with transit agencies to bring back service as ridership picks up to close to normal levels. And what we're hearing is, in some cases, and I think GRTC's one of them, is that they don't have the drivers yet to bring back all the routes that they had before COVID. So that is a concern. And I think some of them are going, and it's not just a Virginia problem. This is a national problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more question, if I could. Chris, any thoughts on extending the free fare and how that's going?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So we just announced a draft grant program. It's in draft. It's in public comment form. But the General Assembly passed a bill that opened the door, gave us some funding for doing some more things to get transit riders. And one of them was putting some money towards free fare service to pilot that. Now, as you probably know, GRTC included, a lot of the transit services want free fare just because of safety. Instead of using the front door, they're using back door where there's no fare box there. So they'll want free. But we have a grant program. We'll be starting a grant program that will allow transit agencies to actually do that, to actually get some funding to run some free service, fare-free service. And then we're going to look at that, what did that do to ridership, and is that sustainable? And so, yes, it is on the books that will be coming out.
Well, Chris, thank you very, very much. We appreciate you taking the time to update us and let us know about this area. So if no more questions, we're going to look to move on. Next, we have Richmond International Airport. And I'm not sure if we have John or Troy, but I'm sure we can get that taken care of here in a minute.
This is John. I think Troy's going to take the lead on the presentation.
Okay. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. And the other gentleman is Troy Bell.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to provide an update. Looking back over some records, and it's been a little while since the airport's been invited to join the committee and present before it. So again, thanks. So it'll be kind of a brief update, and I appreciate Nicole's help. And Nicole, if you would go to the next slide, please. So when you, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, Richmond International Airport is owned and operated by the Capital Region Airport Commission. The commission is a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. There's 14 members of the commission. They're appointed by 4 Richmond region jurisdictions. So the city of Richmond, the counties of Henrico and Chesterfield each have 4 representatives, and Hanover County adds 2 representatives to our members. The airport is considered to be a small hub airport by the FAA. Our best year ever was the one just before the pandemic, 2019, where we reported a record of nearly 4.4 million passengers. Now, when the pandemic hit, air travel, of course, was severely impacted. On the other hand, what we have seen is that cargo volume has significantly increased. We'll talk about both of those here in just a moment. Nicole? This graph is from what the TSA sees in terms of throughput at checkpoints across the country. So if you look at that top line, it's a gray line. That's 2019 pre-pandemic. Things are moving along very nicely. So that's our last kind of normal year. The orange line represents what we saw in 2020. So it started off even better than 2019 until we were getting into serious business with COVID, the declaration of a pandemic, the stay-at-home orders. Essentially, the bottom fell out. So traffic went from record levels down to, at one point, in April, a decrease of 97% versus the prior year. You watch the rest of that orange graph, you can see that it's been a very, very gradual return. You could almost say it in waves. We'd start to make a comeback, and then there would be another wave of concern with COVID infections. It would drop back a bit, and then another period where it would go and drop back and so forth. And now we're into 2021, and you can see the blue line on the graph. And January and February are always slower periods for air travel across the United States and at Richmond. But once we got towards spring break and the middle part of March, in essence, X crossed Y. So we saw traffic surpass what we were experiencing a year ago. It's continued to go up, and in terms of passenger recovery and traffic momentum, it stayed really strong right up to this day, and we anticipate at this point a good summer. If you take a look at it, just to put some numbers on it, through the first 10 months of our fiscal year, and the commission runs the July through June fiscal year, passenger traffic's down more than 60% at RIC. And that's pretty much the number, around 60% across the country. Operating revenue has been similarly affected. And if you look at it also 14 months into the pandemic, it's worth noting that April is the first month where at least half of our traffic has been recovered. And when we report our April numbers next week at the commission meeting, we'll say that we're about 56.3% of the passenger traffic total we reported pre-COVID, going back to April of 2019. So it's the first month what really feels like a true recovery. Nicole, next slide, please. Now, during the pandemic, we've had kind of the unusual development. Even though traffic is off peak, airlines have been very flexible about what they're attempting to do. They're looking for opportunities for revenue, and they're also recognizing that their passenger profile has changed. Prior to the pandemic, the airlines paid an awful lot of attention to business travelers, where they wanted to go. They were frequent travelers. They would generally pay a premium. And a lot of the routes looked like they were built right around that. Well, with the pandemic, parking most business travel, and the number today is still somewhere between 80 to 75% decrease on business travel. The passengers that are traveling right now really fall into two categories. They're either essential travelers, so medical personnel, for example, that might be going from place to place, or military, or they're leisure travelers or VFR, so they're visiting friends and relatives. And the routes that have developed during the pandemic, we've seen 5 new routes come online. 2 very Western destinations, Las Vegas and Los Angeles, have come online as new routes with JetBlue since the start of the pandemic. JetBlue also added Tampa service. More recently, starting last month, we saw Southwest launch service to Chicago Midway. And that was a route that we have been knocking on Southwest's door for better than a decade. It's an important route. We were looking for additional options to Chicago, which is typically a top 5 destination for us. And Southwest would fit the bill. And then finally, it took a pandemic to do it, but they've added that route. Southwest must have liked what they saw with the early returns or early bookings on Midway, and they've doubled down and also added Denver service. So not only do we have competition to Chicago, but as of Mother's Day, we also have competition on the Denver route. So again, 5 new destinations have come online. You'll note on the map, though, that there's a couple of them that show temporarily suspended. In the center at the top, MSP, that's Minneapolis, St. Paul. And if you go straight down from there into Texas, you'll see IAH, Houston Intercontinental. Both of those routes were suspended last spring. They have not returned yet. Both of them still display as being active routes when we go into to June. So forward looking a month, we anticipate that both of these routes come online. And at that point, every destination that was served prior to the pandemic will be back online at RIC, plus some of these new ones, particularly Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Next slide, please. Cargo's really been the opposite side of the coin. We've got a chart here kind of in the middle of the page that shows what our cargo volume has looked like going back to 2010. And you can see at one point it's under 85 million pounds per year. And then not long after that, we cross 100,000. And then 2020 for the calendar year, we nearly hit 160 million pounds of cargo. E-commerce has had an awful lot to do with that. All of our incumbent airlines that fly and focus on cargo, FedEx, UPS, DHL, have reported growth. And then as of June last year, we saw a new arrival, and that would be Prime Air or Amazon. Started flying at RIC. Twice daily cargo flights. They've recently bumped that to 3 times a day. So we're seeing everything, consumer goods, medical supplies, you name it, going by air cargo, and the volume continues to go up. So whereas a record year for us looked like 159 million with calendar year 2020, when we report fiscal year traffic in June, we're more likely to be 180 million pounds, or at least in that ballpark. So we've had our challenges with passenger traffic, but cargo has been the exact opposite. We've absolutely been on a record streak. Okay, next slide, please. Now, we had some questions that were provided to us by Plan RVA, and they're really good discussion prompts. So we're going to address the questions, and as we go, if there's additional thoughts on this or comments or questions, and there's an opportunity at the end, please weigh in. But so the first one came up, how's RIC coordinated plans and initiatives of Plan RVA over the years? There's some good examples. We certainly were involved when GRTC was doing a lot of planning. We were down at the offices there and participating, but directly, probably the best example is CNG. We didn't have CNG capability until just a few years ago. We started working with Plan RVA and such, and we were able to qualify for and benefit from CMAQ funds, so congestion mitigation air quality funds. And with that, we were able to develop a CNG capability at the airport. We have a filling station on there. The airport has also bought 2 different generations, or at least 2 waves of CNG parking shuttles. The first wave had 8 or 9, and then we bought more. We're up to 21 shuttles now. Between those shuttles, they have logged more than 1.5 million miles serving the public at the airport. The benefits are pretty clear. There are reduced tailpipe emissions. They're certainly quieter vehicles than the diesel fleet that we saw before. As an operator, we certainly like the lower maintenance cost and lower energy cost. So it's been a great ad. Now, for the time being, these are parked. I was listening closely when Chris was speaking about van pool operations. We have the same challenges running a parking shuttle. And given the fact that we have so much structured parking and not needing to take on the expense for the shuttles, we have closed economy parking or satellite lots for some time, and we've consolidated everything into the garages. So we expect and hope to have those back up to in service soon. But if they went into service now, you get into questions about mask wearing, which is required in the terminal building and on airport premises, would also be required on the shuttles. And then also even just social distancing in the vehicle. So it's not so much a case where we would have to add the same shuttles back in, and we would peak at, during a shift, maybe 7 or 8 shuttles, but possibly having to go double that because of social distancing. We can't carry a dozen people in a shuttle. We maybe could carry 2 small groups or some individuals who would be widely separated in the vehicle. Another example in terms of coordination is just the airport's master plan. It reflects a location for light rail, for example, from downtown, and certainly other planning considerations as we go forward to accommodate surface transportation. All right, next slide, please, Nicole. In terms of trends, we've talked about it a bit, but prior to the pandemic, we saw substantial growth at the airport. We went from about 3.3 million passengers up to 4.4. Of course, during the pandemic, it's been a great reduction. In terms of landside improvements, there were a number of those made prior to the great recession so that we were in a good position to accommodate growth. Garage construction was part of it. We completely reconstructed the terminal access loop so that we had two-level operations. We're able to separate arrivals and departures. And of course, with federal grant funds, we were able to completely reconstruct Airport Drive. So our capacity, we were in good shape with that. Later improvements since the Great Recession, we've built some more parking. North Garage, we've expanded that. We've also expanded our Economy B lot. We've added a cell phone waiting lot, and a second one has been designed. We look at the access to our commercial lane where vehicles like today, taxis, limousines, black sedans, courtesy vehicles, TNCs all operate in that space along with shuttles when we're running the economy parking operation. So we expanded the access into that commercial lane. We developed a staging area for transportation network companies. When they first arrived, basically, they needed to stage somewhere. And at first they used a public street near the airport, and that had an impact on some of the private businesses that surround our IC. So we developed a staging area, staging lot for them. And then also we have built a road, the East Side Access Road that supports future development of the airport. The old Virginia Air National Guard base, we have tenants over there. There's a notable federal tenant. We have Police Metro Aviation over there. DHL, one of the cargo operators, is on that side. And there's additional acreage prime and ready for development. So we built a road to make that happen and support that when the time's right. And then also just in terms of a manifestation of improvements, a ton of work airside. So if you look at taxiways, rehabbing the runways here at the airport, John could speak to a recent extension we just completed, adding 6 gates for Concourse A. So there's been a lot of work to keep up and try to stay ahead of growth in the region. Okay, next slide, please, Nicole. Environmental issues, they're important. And really the biggest move today was probably the conversion from diesel shuttles over to CNG vehicles. Our shuttle fleet and some service vehicles that we use at the airport have been converted. The shuttles are 100% CNG these days. And prior to that, they were all diesel. We've worked with, we're working with a local party today to bring electrical vehicle recharging capabilities to the airport. If you go back 20 years ago, which is about when I arrived, we had a couple of recharging stations in the garage. Electric vehicles were not popular. Eventually, those spaces were unutilized and that capability went away. But now they're coming back, and you just have to drive down the road and see a Tesla or a Leaf or a Volt or other vehicles as they come online. And we need to have the capability. So more news to follow on that, but we're pretty excited about something that looks like it could be announced in the near future. What we've noted is, aside from the CNG powered buses that GRTC operates and our own diesel fleet and service vehicles, we really haven't seen other sustained commercial or public efforts to switch to alternative vehicles. We may have missed something. We, of course, remember a sedan company that used biofuel, part of its name for a while, kind of popular as it was going, but we haven't seen a replacement on that. We have seen airlines that transition or are planning to transition to electric ground support equipment or GSE type equipment. And then thanks, of course, to a nudge from the UCI 2015 and our partners over at Richmond Region Tourism and otherwise, the airport worked towards certification as a Virginia Green Tourism Partner in 2015 and has been recertified as a partner for that program 3 times since. Next slide, please, Nicole. In terms of technology, the question is, how's the airport using or planning to use technology to enhance travel to and from the facility? Technology's played a pretty big role here for a long time. Parking operations have had a pretty capable system. So that's things like on-site inventory management, location services, like I lost my vehicle, and you reach out to the parking operator and say, here's my license plate. I can't remember if it's North Garage, South Garage, first level, fourth level, we can help you find that. We've also recently, with an upgrade of that system, upgraded some of the systems so that we have low touch or touch-free payment options, such as the near field communications, the NFC type credit cards. Been popular in Europe for years. They've arrived in the States and we see customers using those. We have Apple Pay, Google Pay, and there are several future enhancements under consideration for that system. But probably the biggest use of technology for surface transportation at the airport today, app-based transportation network providers, Uber and Lyft. And I did a count in preparation for this presentation. Since these companies have come online and been permitted to operate at RIC, we've seen over 650,000 pickups at RIC. Probably a similar number of drop-offs. We're working with the operators on that, and I believe that 4 companies are permitted by DMV to operate as TNCs in Virginia, but 2 of them have airport interest. So we're working with Uber and Lyft, and we anticipate finalizing a new agreement with both of these operators here in the near future. And the near agreement will permit better customer service in terms of proximity. They'll be able to operate a little closer to the curbside area. And then also for the drivers, it'll be easier for them. Instead of having to make a access fee payment coming into the commercial lane, it'll all be taken care of by GPS. So it's a nice technology add there as well. And I couldn't help but take a screenshot from Lyft showing where some of the vehicles, it's fun when you see a little bit of a glitch on the app, and I'm pretty sure we didn't have a Lyft out on 1634. So it's just kind of fun to see what the GPS shows sometimes. So, but technology plays a huge role. I mean, not only in the air, not only in managing the facility, but also today with surface transportation. Okay, Nicole, next slide, please. All right, COVID. Chris did a great job of kind of going down to what we've all been dealing with with the pandemic. As far as the airport, we have clearly met or exceeded CDC guidelines as well as state and federal requirements throughout the pandemic, before, after, and I'm sure once it's over, we will continue to do so. We were probably one of the lead agencies when the state came up with the emergency temporary standard to protect workers. And also just doing another count, part of that requires that when people report to their place of business, they have a wellness check upon entering the facility. Well, since doing that for airport direct employees, commission employees, we number about 180 out of 2,500 people at the airport. 180 work directly for the commission. We have done in excess of 50,000 temperature checks, wellness checks as they've come into the facility. We also saw news in terms of accreditation. The Global Biorisk Advisory Council is an accreditation board for protocols to deal with infectious disease prevention. RIC was one of the first 30 airports in the US and the first airport in Virginia to be so recognized. We were accredited as of February 1st. There's a lot more information on our website if you were interested about that. It's not just airports. It can be hotels, it could be event facilities, it could be restaurants. But airports is one category in terms of a facility. And then in terms of the strict compliance with the disease prevention protocols, and we've actively managed this for the entire airport, even though we're just a fraction of the workforce out here, we've taken an active hand, and we've seen infection rates at the airport substantially lower than what you see across the general population in Virginia. Even though the airport operates 24/7, 365, it's an essential business. We are always open, and by its nature, large-scale public access. So large-scale for us, of course, when you're 97% down and have 500 people in your terminal in a day, that's a lot different than what we see now, which is somewhere between 10 and 15,000 going through. And when we fully get back to pre-COVID levels, we'll be a lot closer to 20. But the infection rates have been low, and a lot of credit to our folks that work directly on that. So that's what we've done in terms of working with the COVID-19 pandemic. And just as a reminder, if you've got air travel coming up, until TSA and CDC say otherwise on airport premises, we're going to ask you to wear a mask. All right, next slide, please. And sometimes it's a case where pictures really are worth 1,000 words. A lot of more attention with the pandemic to high touch surfaces, using the right product and the right training for our people. So this is one example. Next slide is another. During the pandemic, we picked up some capabilities for electrostatic cleaning and disinfecting. This is not a plug for one system, but we bought, and this shows a Clorox Total 360 system. This was good for us for working with large spaces in the terminal building. We bought a different system called Protexa for smaller spaces and vehicles, and we're able to cover large areas and do so frequently. Or follow up if we've had a concern, for example, a positive case in an office, we are able to go right back to that office and do this type of procedure. So that's a capability that we've added during the pandemic as well. All right, next slide, please. All right, and I had to get something that actually showed that CNG icon on the back of one of our shuttles. And this is shuttle number 9, temporarily parked, and we look forward to having it back in service soon. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Troy. Appreciate it, folks. Quite a bit of information there. Does some folks have some questions for Troy?
Mr. Chairman, it's Lisa Guthrie. I have a question. There have been additional routes, transit routes going to the airport, and more are on the books, are likely to be implemented in the near future. Could the airport individuals speak to how that has affected their ability to transport employees or passengers?
John, if you could take that. My speaker went out. I missed the question altogether. Or if I could ask for the question to be repeated, my apologies.
That's all right. I'll repeat it. There have been additional transit routes directed to the airport. There are more that are in the plans now for the system redesign. Can you speak to how that has affected the ability of employees to get to work at the airport, and also how it may affect attracting additional riders now that they have this additional method of reaching the airport?
Well, we were really pleased to see the increase of service. When the studies were going on, we looked at it, and I think what we actually saw was different than what we imagined. And prior to the pandemic, we were seeing frequencies of 30 minutes, and GRTC is running 7A and 7B. Those are the two routes that come here. Prior to that upgrade to the 30-minute frequency, we were seeing at best 3 trips a day, and the weekend less than that. So it certainly opened that up, but during the pandemic, the frequency has changed from every 30 minutes to, I believe, hourly service at this point. I think the best and highest use of the transit is to help employees have that transportation option to and from the airport. Now, to do that, I think that one of the enhancements or refinements to the system is taking a look at the schedule. The airport operates basically on a 20-hour schedule. We see the checkpoints open at about 4 a.m. in the morning. So we have employees reporting before 4 a.m. We have flights that continue to arrive until about midnight. So we have employees that stay until after midnight. So what we do see with the transit schedule is that it's very helpful for some employees. It times out properly. It works with their shifts. And for some others, it's just not an option. It doesn't start early enough. It doesn't continue late enough to be able to fully assist them.
Chairman, if I could follow up on Lisa's comment while you were giving your presentation, I appreciate that, Mr. Bell. I live in the city, and according to Google Maps, it takes me 21 minutes to drive to the airport, and to take GRTC would take 2 hours and 21 minutes. And with an 1.5 hour to 2 hour guideline for early arrival, I'm just not going to take 4.5 hours to get out there. Last time I was out in Chicago, I certainly took mass transit to get from O'Hare into the city. And I really wish we could work with GRTC and give us some options, because, 4 hours just isn't a viable option. But I would love to do it if I had something that worked. And I'm sure I'm not the only person.
Mr. Burnley, I tried that myself when we went to the 30-minute trips.
Yeah.
I picked up at that point, the westernmost point, rode downtown, had to transfer well, actually, I think I just made it partway downtown, had to transferred again in the heart of downtown and then out to the airport. And this was with 30-minute frequencies, and it took 2 hours each way. Yeah. That would be at that point from the west end. With the reduced schedule, I think it's harder. Again, if you're on a direct route that 7A and 7B go by, I think it's an outstanding option. It's a little harder when you see the distance pickup.
Right. Thanks.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Bell. We appreciate you and John joining us today and giving us an update. Folks, the number 3 we voted on earlier is that Rebecca could not be with us. So we're up to number 4, Connect RVA 2045 update. Nicole, if you're ready to turn it over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the CTEC. Today, I'll be giving you a very brief or a quick update on the Connect RVA 2045, which is the long-range transportation plan for the Richmond region. To give you a recap on what Connect RVA 2045 is, it's a federally mandated long-range transportation plan for the Richmond region. The plan has to develop a vision for the next 20 years of transportation improvement in the Richmond region. The plan does not only look at the vision, but it's also a cost constrained plan, which means we look at the revenue projections from the state and federal agencies and develop a revenue projection for the future. And based on that revenue projection, we develop a cost constrained list of projects in the LRTP. This LRTP is the region's first performance-based plan, which means that the LRTP would apply a systematic review of the system performances to define the region's investment priorities. This effort is spearheaded by the LRTP Advisory Committee. The scope and the schedule and the establishment of the LRTP Advisory Committee was approved by the Policy Board, Rrtpo Policy Board, on October 2019. So the LRTP Advisory Committee is basically made of all Technical Advisory Committee members. We do have some CTAC members as well. And then we have other agencies participating, like the Virginia Asian Chambers of Commerce, Bike Walk, RVA Rapid Transit, and so forth. So this is basically the LRTP process flow. We basically have 6 tasks or 6 stages in the process, and I'll just give you a brief update on what we have done so far. So the first one is the transportation needs assessment, which we started. Basically, it was looking and identifying the regional and local multimodal transportation issues, issues like congestion, safety, lack of interconnectivity, operational problems, maintenance, inadequate roadway transit capacity, transit expansion, and accessibility, multimodal accessibility, including bike ped, walking, highways and transit, and then other things as well as looking at the travel demand management, transportation system resiliency, as well as the economic development projects which might help in regional transportation. So these were basically gathered through these studies which were done in the region for the last 5 to 7 years. We also looked at the locality comp plans and other plans, studies and plan done by VDOT. And then we also had a public comment period or public outreach in which people would identify issues looking at the map. We also were able to join some of the in-person meetings. This was obviously before the COVID hit, and we gathered information from those communities as well. So altogether, we had more than 1,000 issues. Some of them were issues which could be addressed by a transportation project. Some of them were issues which were policy issues kind of things, which wouldn't be directly solved by any transportation project, but this change in policies at various level, maybe federal level or state or local or regional level. So all these altogether, we had more than 1,000 issues, and that was approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee May of last year. So once the transportation needs was established, we went to the second phase, which is the strategic direction, in which the task objective was basically to develop the vision and goals for the long range transportation plan, and also with the goals and vision to develop objectives and then performance measures within each goal, which could measure the achievement towards the goals and the performance measures. So this task had a very long process. It was introduced to the LRTP Advisory Committee first. Then we had a couple of surveys, which I will be giving a brief update towards the end of this presentation. Based on the public input, we did staff synthesis. We received more than, I'm forgetting the numbers, but it was around 535 unique vision for the region. Once the staff, based on the public input, synthesized that, we presented that to the LRTP Advisory Committee for their input, and it was a working session. We discussed the vision and the goals for the region, and we created a draft from that, which was introduced to the policy board, and they had some thoughts as well. Then it went to a 15-day public review period, and based on the comments we received from the public, we did some modification, and staff developed the final recommendation, which went to the LRTP Advisory Committee, and they provided some feedback, and it was changed again. And then finally, we presented that to the policy board. They made 2 changes, and then immediately making that changes, they adopted that. So that was adopted in February of this year. So this is the approved vision, goals, and objective. The vision for the region is that the transportation system in the Richmond region will reliably and safely connect people, prioritize more equitable opportunities for all to thrive and live healthy lives, promote a strong economy, and respect environmental stewardship. So it covers a lot of ground. To expand that, we have 7 guiding principles. I'm not going to read that. And then we have goals, measure 5 goals, basically looking at safety, environmental, land use, equity, accessibility, economic development, and then mobility. And then within each goals, we have a certain number of objectives. And to measure each objectives, or basically to measure each goals, we have some performance measures as well. So once, parallelly, while we were working to finalize the goals, vision, and objectives, we worked on the 3rd phase of the plan, which is basically the planning. So the planning phase is basically to create a universe of projects. So what is the universe of projects? It's basically a streamlined list of all regionally significant multimodal transportation projects. So what can be in the universe of project? It has to address an issue from the LRTP issues and needs, as I mentioned earlier, which was approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee. The project has to be inside the RRTPO metropolitan area boundary. So currently, we don't, the MPA boundary, metropolitan planning area boundary, doesn't coincide with the region's boundary. We have some rural areas in both east and west side, like Goochland, Powhatan, Charles City, and New Kent. Those areas are not included in the MPA boundary as per the current boundary. So any projects though in those areas are not included. And then finally, we develop what is called as the LRTP project inclusion guidelines. So it means that only a project of certain magnitude, which we call as a regionally significant project, can be included in the LRTP. So this is a regional plan. So we have to establish some kind of magnitude for the project. So obviously, I'll give you a very easy example. Sidewalks, that's a major issue all about, but that's a local issue. It's not a regional issue. So that inclusion of addition of sidewalks, things like that, it's not included. Well, an extension of transit route, that's regional in nature. The widening interstate or major arterial, that's a regional project. Creating a trail throughout the region, that's a regional project. So we had criteria for all these projects, and we developed this based on federal guidance, and then made our own interpretation on that to establish what is regional in nature. And then the final thing was that we looked at the projects based on local and regional transportation plans and studies, again, to see if the solution for those issues have already been established in the comprehensive plans or any other plans. And some of the issues which were not covered in the any studies which was done recently or the locality comprehensive plan, it was basically proposed by the project champion, which is basically the localities as well as Rrtpo staff. And then finally, we don't want any controversial project in the list. So the political will to proceed with any project is very important. So this is the summary for the universe of projects. Altogether, we have 268 projects. Highway, it's the bulk of the projects. It's 66% of the total needs, which is more than $5 billion. It includes 184 projects. Bridge projects, basically only those bridges which are structurally deficient and are in the national highway system can be, we looked at only those bridges. So we have 16 bridges, either replacement or rehabilitation of those bridges. Transit, we looked at the enhanced transit route as well as the BRT route, which came out from the Richmond DRPT's Richmond Regional Transit Vision Plan, and then the follow-up of that plan, which we are calling the Transit Vision Plan Phase 2. So altogether, 6 BRT routes and 4 enhanced transit service routes. Those were included. And the cost for that, the needs is basically the capital cost. We are not including any operational costs for transit. So the capital cost includes sidewalks throughout the corridor, any crosswalks, bus stops, the purchase of new buses, transportation system priority softwares, things like that. So that's why you see a lot of needs, as in dollars, for transit. So altogether, we had 11 transit projects. And then for active transportation projects, we had 34 projects, which included all the section of the Fall Line Trail, which are currently not funded or haven't secured any funding. Then we had some other regional trails as well, which we included. Park and rides, we had 14 park and rides projects included. And then finally, rail, 9 projects, 3 projects from DRPT's Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative, 3 projects to expand or reconstruct the Staples Mill station, and then 3 industrial access projects, which would basically be covered by private funds. So altogether, 9 railway projects. The total needs, as it stands now, is $7.69 billion. And there are a few other projects which came out from the studies, I-95 projects, which are basically I-95 interchange modification projects around downtown, which we don't have a cost yet. So it's likely to increase from $7.69 billion. And also to remember is this is 2020 dollars. So we have to account for inflation as well. All these projects, if they are secured for funding, or if they are in the LRTP long range transportation plan, it can only build after a certain year, which is the year in which the VDOT's 6-year improvement plan ends. So currently, all these projects can only be funded from 2027. So that means we need to add the inflation for those 6 years, and that will definitely cross $8 billion. So this was presented in the LRTP, to the LRTP Advisory Committee first. They approved that, and then we presented to the policy board in May, and it was approved by them as well. So the next step is phase 4, which is programming. So we have the needs, which is $7.6 billion, but we only have a certain amount of funding. So we calculate that based on the revenue projections, which VDOT and DRPT provides. So we have we have state funds, we have federal funds, and now because of the CVTA, we have regional funds as well. So we look at all those funding, and we are in process of developing how much funding we have till 2045. And based on the initial calculation, I think we might be able to fund 60 to 70% of projects. So we have to prioritize them. So the next step is scoring and evaluation of the project, which is currently going on. Staff has developed a very data-driven process, which looks at 15 performance measures based on the goals and the objectives of the plan, and evaluates all those projects with those 15 performance measures. So once the scoring of all the projects have been done, staff will provide a recommendation of the constraint list of projects. So it'll basically be the subset of the universe of projects. So we have 284 projects, and let's say we will only be able to fund 180 projects. So that would be the constraint list of projects. And then we'll review with the project champions, which is basically the localities, VDOT, DRPT, and as well as the advocates, and see if everybody agrees with the constraint list of projects. Some projects might score well, and it might not be a priority for all. So what we are seeing based on staff recommendation is the technical list, and that would obviously be reviewed by all, and then there might be a slight changes on that, and we'll review that. And we have, when everybody comes into an agreement, and that would be the constraint list of projects, which we will present to the policy board for approval. So once that is done, we have to do the evaluation of the plan. So one thing is the air quality conformity assessment. We have to look at how much emissions these new projects create, and whether there is a certain budget for this emissions, and whether those projects, the emissions created by those projects pass the budget we have. Then we do the environmental justice analysis, looking at the equity component, whether the most vulnerable population or the underserved population have received enough per capita spending of the transportation dollars in comparison with the non-EJ or environmental justice areas. So we'll do that analysis. We'll also do an accessibility analysis, looking at what was the change in accessibility based on the implementation of all the projects in the long range transportation plan. So basically compare with the whatever is committed and existing as per now, which is basically the 6th SIP year, which is 2026, and then projecting that to 2045 and seeing if nothing is built, if everything is standstill, and comparing that with the implementation of all the projects in the long range transportation plan, what would be the accessibility gain in walking, biking, driving, and in transit as well. And also we'll be looking at other performance measures. Also, the last thing is the economic impact analysis, which is basically looking at how the implementation of all these projects changes our economy. How does it bring more jobs, things like that. It's still to be determined based on if we have enough time to do that or not. But these all things would be done once the constraint plan has been approved by the policy board. And then finally, the plan adoption is October 7th. That's the absolute deadline, which we need to approve this plan and send that document to Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration for their review as well. So I just also wanted to give you a brief update on the public input opportunities we had in this process. So the Connect RVA 2045, it basically started early 2020, and we created a dedicated website, Connect RVA, www.connectrva2045.org, and that website has been accessible since February of 2020, and anything which is updated, anything which changes, we update that periodically, and all the information is available in that website. And then we also have a dedicated email for this this process. Anybody who wishes to email us at any point can email us. So basically that opportunity is throughout this process. And then for the phase 1 transportation needs assessment, as I mentioned earlier, we had some community outreach meetings in February and early March. I was able to go to NACCP meeting, join their meeting That's the only one which I did. Some other staff did some other meetings. And based on the community input, we added the issues based on those community inputs. And then we also had the issue interactive map, in which we had a map, the online map of the region, and people could point out to the exact location by a point or line and say what exactly the issues were. So that was from the March till the April 15th of 2020. So that was basically for phase one, the transportation needs assessment. For the strategic direction, the vision, goals, and objective development, we basically had a vision survey in which people could provide a word or two which would best describe the vision for the region for next 25 years. So connected, that was one of the most buzzword which we received. That's why our plan is Connect RVA 2045. Then we had the regional goals and priorities surveys, in which we asked the public about what the goals of the project of this process should be and what the priorities are. The third one was the vision, goals, and strategic survey being built on the second survey, and in which we asked about the vision. And as I mentioned earlier, we received 535 unique vision statement for the plan. And based on staff synthesis, we created one. For the fourth phase, which is the constraint plan development, we had the budget allocation survey, so which just ended a few days back. So basically, we asked the public that if you have $100, what would be the amount you want to spend on all these different modes? Like, what do you want to spend on active transportation? What do you want to spend on transit, on highways, maintenance, equity, accessibility? And this survey just ended. So along with the public outreach period, we also had the formal public comment period in this process. So the first phase, once we received all the public comments, as well as we developed 1,089 issues, we created a spreadsheet, and then we asked to provide any input from the public of the list which we had created. So that was 15 days, and it was in early May of 2020. Similarly, once we finalized the vision, goals, and objectives, we had a 15-day review period, and we received a lot of comments during that time as well. The universe of projects, once that was completed, we initially had that for 15 days, but we received a lot of comments and a lot of comments from the public as well to extend the period. So we extended that period to altogether 38 days, and we received more than 1,000 comments on the universe of projects. So now the next phase is funding, which is basically once we have the constraint plan developed, the list of projects, we'll ask the public to review the candidate projects and provide any weigh in into the Rrtpo funding decision and provide any comments on that. That's tentatively scheduled for June 2nd to June 17. And then finally, once everything is done, the constraint plan has been adopted, we'll be asking the final public comment period, which would be the comment for all the processes in the plan. So including the plan draft document. So that's going to be 30 days in late summer. We'll be also sending the document to the environmental as well as state agencies. And we are also going to present to all Board of Supervisors, City Council, Town Council, all 9 localities of our region, as well as if there is opportunities and based on how the COVID situation is, we are also going to have in-person committee meetings as well, but that's still undecided at this moment. So that's all I have. There's a lot of, this is a lot. I think the last time I updated CTAC was once the issues were finalized, probably it was around September last year. So a lot has happened after that. So if you want any immediate, if you have any immediate question, I'll be happy to answer any, but if you want to know anything details, I'll be able to talk offline as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, folks. Quite a bit of information. People, a couple of questions. Okay, well, hearing done right now, what we'll do is let's move on to the election of officers.
Robert, could I ask a quick question, please?
Okay. Hey, Bob, sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Mr. Errol, in light of the time horizon of the plan, I'm curious why the rural localities are not included in the MPA boundary.
So basically, the definition for the MPA boundary is the urbanized area, which is decided by the US Census Bureau, and areas which are likely to be urbanized in next 20 years. So based on that definition, we had the MPA boundary, which covers portions of New Kent, Charles City, Goochland, and the fourth one I forgot. Goochland, Charles City, New Kent, and Powhatan. Yeah, the 4 localities. So it covers the portions of those. But recently, the policy board now has adopted the whole reason to be inside the MPA boundary. So that's been done, but it takes a while. That decision has to go through from our policy board, go to the state, and we need a formal letter from the governor of Virginia to actually change the official boundary. So that's still in progress, and we haven't received a letter from the governor, but it's likely that the boundary would change in a couple of years' time, maybe this year, maybe next year, and then for the next LRTP, we'll include all of the Richmond region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. I know you can hear me, but if I turn on my camera, we're up to the election of officers. According to our bylaws, what this basically does is that it is a rotating. I know that Ken's already reached out to both people, but the chairman is going to be Upton Martin, and the vice chair will be Lisa Guthrie. But officially, we need to have an action on this. I would like to ask for a motion to accept these new officers, as they both have said that they would serve.
So moved.
Okay, that's Mike Testament. I need a second.
Seconded, Charles Resnick.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion carries. I would like to say while I was on this is good luck to both of you. Is that it's been a really strange situation of being the chairman from a virtual standpoint and not getting to see you all personally. But I hope that I've been able to bring some extra to the meetings, and I hope that everybody's been pleased. Right now, we have other business, CTAC announcements and open comment. Does someone have an announcement? An open comment? Well, I will take just a second here to let everyone know that I have asked Nicole, because not everyone can get on chat. Some people are live on YouTube and some folks are on the phone. I've asked Nicole, and she has agreed that she's going to send the links out that Champ was talking about to everyone via email. So you will have those. So folks that you're on the phone or whatever, you don't have to worry, because the only people can see that is if we were on the chat. So she's going to send that out. If you will look at page 16 of your agenda, you will find our future meeting topics. And as we've always said, that if you feel that there's something that you would like to have added on, of course, please send that in to Ken, chat those folks to see if it's viable to be able to do something. But right now, it looks like we got a fairly full schedule for the rest of this year, unless something happens to drop off. But other than that, I mean, are there any CTAC member comments? Well, I would like to say once again, thank all of you all for your patience and time with during this virtual meetings. I told Ken one of the things I miss most is seeing the people. The second thing is getting that lunch over at the building. He got a kick out of that. But thank you all very much for helping to support and bring this along during this trying time. Our next meeting, which Upton will be the chairman, will be July the 15th. And that will be noon. And I'm sure that Nicole and everybody will be sending that out to you. I'm sure Upton that Ken will be reaching out to you before that in order to go over the agenda. Is there any last things before we adjourn?
Bob, I'd just like to take the opportunity as the incoming chairman to thank you, Ken, Chet, and all the others for leadership throughout our trying times. I can tell you that I'm not going to be wearing a tie to the meetings, though.
That's okay. I've been back in the office. That's why you're always seeing me in a tie.
But thank you sincerely for your leadership and during these trying times, and made what must have been a relatively complicated process look relatively easy. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you all very much, especially to Ken and Nicole and Chet, the folks back there at Plant RVA have made it just real easy. It really has been. Just the biggest thing of it is just showing up and speaking a few words. So thank you very much for your kind words. Anybody else got any last things before we adjourn? I do need a motion and a second to adjourn. If somebody would please motion.
Moved.
Was that Lisa?
Yes.
All right, I need a second, please.
Second.
Okay, that's Amber. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries and the meeting is over. You all have a great weekend.
Thank you.